Hello, welcome to Rochelle Reads. I'm Deja, and today we are going to do a recent read. This last month has been a very interesting month in terms of my reads. I had a few highs and lows, nothing that I would give 2 stars, although I did DNF a few books, but not going to talk about those today. But of the books that I've read, I had a few surprises and a few that were just kind of disappointing because I knew that they could have been amazing. But without further ado, let's get into this video. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Mrs. Wiggins, and I hesitate to really describe this book because I feel like it benefited me to not really know what I was getting when I went into the story. So the summary really speaks about how Mrs. Wiggins ends up with her husband who is gay, and they do not want to come together to really have a child, but they do this little workaround just so she can end up having a child, and everything works out from there. And from the summary, you get the sense that she will do anything for her child. And that's pretty much where I want to leave it from there, because where the story goes very much surprised me. It had a lot of different elements. This book actually takes place in the past in the Deep South, and I don't know if that would necessarily make it historical fiction. I believe it is, but this is not a historical fiction that I have ever read before, because it also has mystery thriller elements to it, which I found very fascinating. And I feel like this genre blend of what the story actually is really benefited the story. I also think that Mrs. Wiggins was an interesting character because she has this motivation for her child, and it really just started to make me think what is something that a mother wouldn't do for her child. And I'm not a mother, so I don't even know, but this woman, her main purpose is really her child and making sure that he is being taken care of, that he is well, and that he's on the right path in life. The way that she deals with some of the things that come up is very very interesting. I feel like I keep saying that, but I don't know how else to say anything about this book without it being a spoiler, because I really do think that this book will surprise you because it takes a twist that I never would have thought I saw coming. In addition to just those elements, I just really like the historical aspects of the story, because while it is taking place in the past in the Deep South, not necessarily during the times of slavery or immediately after, but you're really following a time where racism is still rampant, and the only jobs that women can really do, especially Black women, is be a maid or a washer or something in a white person's house. But despite taking place during this time, I did not think that this was very heavy on the racial trauma, which was another very big surprise for me, because I feel like a lot of historical fiction, especially featuring Black people, it focuses on those traumatic things, but this one, they were just pretty much existing, and they had elements of racial trauma and stuff happening, but it wasn't the entire focus of the story. If anything, Mrs. Wiggins was definitely way more proactive in a lot of those things that were happening, and I really enjoyed it for that. And just the aspect of showing a Black community and just the way that they support each other, and she supports her friend a lot. It was just very big on the community elements of it, which I really enjoyed. So I know I didn't really give much about this book, but I think that's for the best, because I do recommend that more people read it, because especially if you like historical fiction, I think that this would be a nice break from what is traditionally Black historical fiction. The next book that I have that surprised me is The Wife Before. And this book I was hesitant to read because I tried to read this author's Vicious Bonds, and I was not a fan at all. I don't think that this author's writing does well for fantasy romance, but in this thriller mystery aspect, I really like how simple her writing is. This wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but it wasn't the worst one. And I actually did find myself engaged in wanting to figure out what is actually going on, which is really what I want from a mystery thriller. Like, I don't necessarily think it has to be amazing for me to like it. In this book, you're really following this young woman who is pretty much like broke. She has nothing going on for her life, and she ends up meeting like a rich golfer, but this rich golfer is accused or was accused of murdering his wife. The details of his wife's death was just very weird, and everyone was pretty much like side-eyeing him because it just didn't really add up. But he's adamant that he didn't do anything, and so they end up getting married to each other. After they end up married, they end up on this house that he owns that's more secluded and is away from everything, and she finds this wife's journal. And so as she's going through the journal, that's when all of these extra details start coming out. And I don't think I would have ever predicted where this story was going, because wow, that ending was crazy. I would have never thought that that is where the story was going, but I am not mad at the direction that it took. Again, this is one that I think that going in with less expectations and just kind of going with like the flow, I think that's where people will find enjoyment with this, because like I said, I don't think Shannora Williams is the strongest writer, but when it comes to like the mystery thriller elements, I do think that she really did excel in making me want to know what happened. I do think that sometimes when we were going through like the journal entry, it's like I just kept getting a little bit bored, and I was just like, where is this going? Why do we need to know all of these details? And I just almost felt like the main character was a little too passive, in my opinion. Like, she was active, but like when she was going through those journals, like I was just like, you're not really doing anything in the present. And I don't know, I think that slow build could have been like tightened up a little bit, but overall I think that this was a good story, and I would recommend if you're in the mood for a short mystery thriller. The next one that I have is a manga, and this is Death Note number 5, which is Whiteout. And this one, I am slowly starting to lose interest at the Death Note series, because something happened in this one that I am just like, oh gosh, like where is the story going to go now? Especially because the reason why I really liked the first few books in the series is because of the dynamic between the two characters, but that dynamic is pretty much gone now. And so yeah, I don't know where the story is going to go now, and I'm still gonna stick it out because I have heard that the middle books are not that great, but that the ending is probably worth it. So I'm gonna keep reading, but this one was definitely not a favorite of mine. So yeah. The next one that I have is Village Reavers, which I was very slowly reading this. I picked it up for Caribathon, and I didn't exactly finish it before like the live discussion, but I was like, you know, let me just go ahead and finish it, because I was just going to DNF it, because after like the discussion I wasn't really called to pick it up, but I was like, let me just finish it to see like what happens. And I think I probably could have done with like DNFing it. And that's not to say that this book is bad, because I think the writing is beautiful. It really did feel like I was in like the Caribbean, and I really did enjoy reading about like these women's lives. But the thing with like literary fiction, it gets to be at a point where I'm just like, why is this story continuing? Like, I think I need a little bit extra to happen, and that extra just did not happen. So while I did enjoy the atmosphere in the story, I just don't think that it was very memorable to me. I think I would try more by this author, but I just think I need a little bit extra when I'm reading a story like this. The next one that I have is Curvy Girl Summer, and I absolutely enjoyed this one 100%. It's not quite a 5-star read for me, but overall I really enjoy this one. I found myself smiling the entire time reading this book because I thought that the banter was so cute, and I also just really like the family aspects of this story, and I really did enjoy just the representation of being a curvy girl in a family that is also like pushing you to get married. But definitely my favorite part about this book was just the main characters together, and I also just really appreciated that the main character was actually like a fleshed out person. Like he had his own little things going on that really influenced a lot of like how he approached things, and I was really surprised seeing that, especially because this book is in only the main female character's point of view. Like you don't ever get to see like his perspective, but you still get to know him and see him as like fleshed out, and I just really enjoyed him and her. I will say that she started to annoy me towards the end, especially because she's just so headstrong that at the end I was just like, can you just like pretty much like stop being so stubborn and just admit what you're feeling for each other? And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Another surprise for me was Missing White Woman. This is an author that I've also tried before. She wrote Hollywood Homicide, which I quickly DNF'd because the writing was not for me, but this one I devoured it. I absolutely enjoyed my time reading this. In this story, you're really following this girl who goes on vacation with her boyfriend, and when she wakes up one morning, there's a dead white woman on the floor of the Airbnb that they're staying in. And then there's this whole thing with a missing white woman happening that this popular influencer is really covering the news for, and people are starting to speculate that maybe this is her, and it's just all of this like craziness happening. I really enjoyed the aspects of social media really playing a part in how somebody can clear their name, how it's influencing the investigation, the attacks people go on based off of the information that an influencer goes on. Like I absolutely really enjoyed that one, especially because you see that happening a lot more. This influencer has no idea what's going on, and just seeing the way that they're almost like a cult, in that like whenever somebody from her followers like see something, like they report it and then she reports it, and then everything just spirals out of control from there. Like that element was amazing. Like I was so pulled in by that story. I was so pulled in by that aspect of the story. I also thought that there was a very interesting relationship between the main character and her lawyer, and I won't go into too much detail about that, but it was a very interesting element to include in the story, especially because I feel like you don't really get it wrapped up a lot. So yeah, it was a very interesting part of the story. But I think overall that this story, with the social media elements, the missing white woman that's on the side of like that social media element, covering that, in addition to like the murder that happened, like all of these elements have made for a very good story, and it just kept making me want to turn the pages, and I absolutely love it for that. I will definitely read more by this author because wow, that was like such a wild ride, and I really enjoyed it. The next one that I have is one that I kind of enjoy, but also I don't know. So this book is Rootwork. I read this for July Noir. As with like the other ones that I read, those were also for July Noir, but this one definitely for July Noir. I saw it on like the spreadsheet and I was like, cool, I can get it on Hoopla. This one I'm kind of confused on why it was on July Noir, because it didn't really give me crime fiction vibes. Like there's things that happen and a crime does happen, but I don't feel like that was like the main point of the story. Like I think part of my thing with this book is that I came in with like the wrong expectations. I knew that something was going to happen, but I feel like it happened a little later in the story. And I also think that the beginning part of this was kind of slow. And I think because I came in with the expectations that, oh, this is going to be focused on like a crime that happened, and then the crime didn't happen until like 50% into the book. And the first half of this book, you're really following these 3 little girls who are learning root work from their aunt. And I feel like that's really what the story wanted to be. And the crime almost felt like second nature to the story. And yeah, I just feel like the pacing had a little bit issues in terms of like the plotting structure of it. And I think that if it really would have been focused on them learning root work, I think it would have been perfectly fine for me, because I actually did like the beginning of the story. I really love the dynamic between the characters, especially like the little girl, Pee-wee, I believe her name is. I really enjoyed like hearing her thoughts and just like her childlike thoughts just on everything going on, and just learning root work from her aunt. But I think as soon as that crime happened, like everything just kind of went downhill for me, which is kind of disappointing, because I think that this could have been a very interesting story, but it just didn't deliver what I wanted it to be. The next book that I have is one that was also kind of disappointing, and that is The Second Chance of Darius Logan. This one I picked up because David F. Walker wrote the Bitterroot series, which I definitely enjoyed, and so I was like, I wonder how this author will do in a novel format. And this one was not the best for me. Right off the bat, you really start with a character, Darius, who gets into trouble with the police. And from there, I felt like it was going to be like a fast-paced story with like superheroes and everything. And the interesting thing about this book is that Darius Logan doesn't actually have superpowers. And so he's working with superheroes and just trying to see if he can like even help with that, because usually like the stories go, like these characters usually have a superpower that makes them like a hero. But since he doesn't have superpowers, I thought that that could have been like an interesting element, and I don't think that it really did after like finishing the book. And I don't think that's like a fault of the book. I think the book does well in a lot of other aspects in terms of the conversations of incarcerated individuals. This one is really talking about giving like a second chance to a lot of them, and a lot of those incarcerated people, depending on their offense, they get the opportunity to work at this superhero location to basically get a second chance outside of being behind bars. And I like that element of it. I think in the beginning it was very much explaining just the biases that people have, especially Darius. He did have a little bit of those biases when he was going into this like program to get a second chance. But I feel like that focus really got away from the story the further that the story like continued. I think another aspect of the story that just kind of was disappointing for me is just there was a little bit of a romance that I didn't hate, but like I just think that it was underdeveloped like most YA books. And I also think that this book suffered from like pacing issues, because soon after he even gets to this superhero organization, everything really slows down until it picks up. And then there's even like times that there's like so much info dumping that I'm just like, gosh, like I kept zoning out during the audiobook during those info dumps, because it was really just explaining the world and just how this event happened, and it really was trying to set up the villain, but I just found it so boring that I was just so disappointed, because like I said, this book started out very strong, but I feel like this book was just a lot of setup for the future books, and half of it probably did not need to be in the story. The last one that I have to talk about is The Truth of the Aleke, which is the sequel to The Lies of the Jungle. I like The Lies of the Jungle, and this one, The Truth of the Aleke, I feel like I like this one more, which surprises me because I feel like the reviews that I've been seeing, people have not liked this one more. But the way that this book ended, I am just like, I need the third one. I was just like, I know this is not how this series is going to end. Like, it cannot end this way, because, oh my gosh, like, my mind was blown reading this, and I was like, this is exactly what I want in a fantasy. My fantasy reads have not been so good, and I feel like this one just breathed life into me, because this is like what I want in a fantasy. Now, I want this author to write a full-length book, because the ending alone of this book really set the bar high for me in terms of like the next book. But just even like the reveals, and then like you have all of these characters that are painted as like heroes versus villains, but then you're also like, are they really the heroes? Are they really the villains? Like, those are the dynamics that I really, really enjoy in fantasy. Like, I love morally gray, and I wouldn't necessarily say that these are morally gray, but the way that the author paints like perception, oh my gosh, I loved it. Like, I am like almost teetering on giving this like 5 stars, but I don't think it's quite a 5-star for me because I could have spent all day in this world. And gosh, like, I really, really enjoyed this. Like, I had some really good reads this month, but like this one, ending it, I definitely need the next one. I cannot wait. If I can find it on NetGalley, I will definitely be requesting it because, oh my gosh, like, I need to know what happens next. But that wraps up this round of recent reads. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I had some great reads and I had some not great reads, but overall, I think that it was a fairly good month, and so I'm happy with it. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and maybe comment a book that you have been enjoying lately. And if you don't want to do that, you can also just leave a water emoji for the truth of the Aleke, because water is a big element in this series so far, so definitely do that. But I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.